Well, an emergency meeting is underway right now between all levels of government on the Ottawa protest, and we'll find out what happened later this hour from Federal Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino, and we're also going to speak in a few minutes with City Councillor Diane Deans. But first, the NDP is demanding an emergency debate in the House of Commons on the Ottawa convoy. Convoy protesters have shut down and disrupted Ottawa's downtown for 11 days so far. Jagmeet Singh is the leader of the NDP. He's in Brampton, Ontario. Jagmeet Singh, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
What do you hope this emergency debate accomplishes to, concretely make things better in the downtown core of Ottawa?
Well, I was looking at the situation and something needs to be done. And one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people is they're saying that the Prime Minister seems to be missing. This is a serious crisis in our nation's capital. It's been spreading to other cities. Where is the federal government? Where is specifically the Prime Minister? So I'm hoping that this emergency debate creates an opportunity for federal leadership. Four things I want to raise. One is that I'm calling for the Prime Minister to meet with the municipalities impacted, whether that's the Coots border crossing in Alberta, Ottawa, Quebec, Toronto, Vancouver, or anywhere else where they're impacted, and offer proactively federal supports. And just the presence of the Prime Minister showing up and saying, I want to meet, I think sends a really clear message. Secondly, I think what needs to be done is the money that's going into this convoy is political interference, foreign interference, because the convoy's goals have been stated from the beginning and they're not shying away from it. It's clear they want to overthrow the government. They want to replace it with an unelected committee. Supporting that is political interference, foreign interference, and it is something that has to be stopped, particularly given the number of donations that were anonymous in the GoFundMe, as well as donations that were from the States, from the United States. And then third and fourth, I think there needs to be a plan. Canadians who've gotten vaccinated and have done everything right are wondering, what do we do next? We want a plan. We need a plan to know what's it going to take to get out of this pandemic. And then finally, there's been things that were a problem before the pandemic that only got worse in this. Let's make sure we're working together to solve those problems.
So you're trying to drag the Prime Minister into the conversation? Is that how I should interpret the first objective you have there?
Well, yeah, we think that the Prime Minister has a role to play and the federal government has a role to play. And we feel like the federal government has either not been there or constantly saying that it's not their jurisdiction. And of course, we know that we are governed by a constitution and there are jurisdictional areas of competence and areas where we can and cannot work. But to me, a leader is someone who tries to find a solution, doesn't look for an excuse. And when there's a crisis of this nature, a Prime Minister and a federal government should be looking for solutions. How can we help? What can we do to get involved?
What would that solution be, sir?
Themselves by saying it's not our job.
But what would that solution be? I mean, people call for the army, but the Prime Minister can't deploy the army without a formal request from the government of Ontario. It can't direct the RCMP. It can help second RCMP officers to the city if they ask for it. So practically, what can a federal government do to do things like get rid of the refueling station out of Coventry Road, for example?
Well, I think the first job of leaders is just to show up. Just the fact of showing up has a lot of weight and carries a lot of presence. And then taking the stance that we are going to do everything we can to help, as opposed to the approach, which is, it's not our jurisdiction, it's not our job. We're here, though. That approach in itself is a bit of an abdication of responsibility. To take the approach that, it's not our jurisdiction, flies in the face of a crisis. A crisis in its definition requires us to go above and beyond if we want to solve it.
So if you were Prime Minister today, what would you do, sir? What would Prime Minister Jagmeet Singh do?
Immediately meet with the mayor, sit down with the mayor and make it openly clear that I'm meeting with the mayor to discuss how we can solve this. Offer every and any resource possible in a proactive way to solve this. Come out with a plan to Canadians. Say, hey, we need to solve this pandemic. We need to get past this. People have done the right thing. The vast majority of Canadians are vaccinated, but they're still frustrated that we're not past this thing yet. What do we need to do? And one of those steps is going to involve in funding our healthcare system appropriately, because one of the reasons for the lockdowns or for restrictions is because our healthcare system continues to be overrun. Well, it's inexcusable that 2 years into the pandemic, our healthcare system is still being overrun. We know a big part of that is the underfunding at the federal level. So funding for appropriate levels of nursing staff, healthcare workers, making sure that we've got the resources to deal with any sort of uptakes in admissions because of the pandemic. We need to make sure vaccines are still a part of the solution as well as testing. But I would take proactive steps.
But a big part of why the health systems have been overrun in Canada is because of the unvaccinated in the Omicron wave, in particular in the intensive care units. It's people who are not vaccinated for whatever reason. So, I mean, this protest, what it seeks to accomplish only prolongs that situation, does it not?
Well, there's an inherent irony in that for sure. But I think one of the things that healthcare experts have known from the beginning is that it's very difficult to get 100% vaccination rate. Mm-hmm. So the fact that we're hovering around 90% is a testament to the vast majority of Canadians doing the right thing. If it was always predicted that there will be a percentage of people that don't get vaccinated, it's not a good excuse to say, well, because of them, we're being overrun. There needs to be enough resources available in our healthcare system to deal with that. We can't force everybody. We want to encourage people. We want to make it as easy as possible. And we want to use the tools that we have to encourage vaccination. And we have. 90% is pretty good. Now what we need to do is, okay, how do we live with this COVID-19? What do we do to be able to continue to live in a way where we're not being overrun or our healthcare system is not being overwhelmed?
Right.
That means funding it appropriately to compensate for or address the fact that there will be some percentage of the population that may not be vaccinated. But we need to be ready to deal with that as well as the needs of people. There shouldn't be delays. There shouldn't be healthcare or surgical procedures pushed back because of the healthcare system not being resourced enough.
There were two things the federal government put on the table today. One was a trilateral table, a federal, provincial, municipal committee essentially to organize a response. But the second was a suggestion from Minister Omar Al-Gabra, the Transport Minister, urging the Ontario equivalent, Caroline Mulrooney, to ask the province to work with insurance companies so that people illegally parked face consequences, maybe going after commercial licenses and going after their insurance. Do you support measures like that to end what is happening in Ottawa?
Oh, I think those are very appropriate measures. I think they make a lot of sense. I think that's an example of trying to find solutions. But again, at that press conference, when I listened into it, it sounded pretty clear to me that the ministers, their message was, this is not our jurisdiction. This is a provincial jurisdiction. They should step up. That to me is not leadership. Leadership is, hey, we're in a crisis. Let's do everything we can to solve it. That suggestion was a good one. But the approach of saying it's not our job is not what I expect from a leader. And it's not what I would do as Prime Minister.
Well, they haven't just said it's not our job. They're saying it's not our job, but what we will offer whatever resources you ask for. I mean, it's a little bit more nuanced than saying it's not our job, isn't it?
It is, but the fact that they're even saying that, I mean, who in a crisis resorts to saying it's not my job?
Well, it's not our jurisdiction, is what they've
I
said.
think of, or it's not my jurisdiction. I don't think that, to me, it doesn't sound like a leader, and I wouldn't do that. I would be looking at the fact that this is the highest level of government in the country, with significant resources. Their approach should be, we've got a problem, we are going to take every step we can to help solve it. Not, we're available, we're here, but it's not our jurisdiction, but we're still offering the support. That to me is not leadership. And the fact that the Prime Minister has not been seen in this very serious crisis as it's been escalating is also a problem.
Jagmeet Singh, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.